Hello, welcome back to our study of the book of Mark. If you've been enjoying these Bible studies, I would love it if you would like and subscribe so that you can get updates and notifications whenever there's new videos out. Today we're looking at Mark chapter 3. We're looking at verses 20 and 21, and then again at verses 31 through 34. If you would allow me to read them to you, they go like this. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, "He is out of his mind." Then jumping down to 31, then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call for him. A crowd was sitting around, and they told him, "Your mother and your brothers are outside looking for you." "Who are my mother and my brothers?" Jesus asked. Then he looked at those seated in a circle around him, and he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother." So what we have going on here in this passage is, it's called bracketing. Mark does this a lot, where he starts a story, and then he tells something in the middle that's different, and then he comes back to the story. So he did that in verses 20 and 21 when he said that Jesus' family went to get him when they heard what he was doing, as they said he's out of his mind. That's the beginning. Then he goes off and he talks about the unforgivable sin and what's going on, the guys lowering the paralytic down. And then after that story, he comes back to and he says, "And when they arrived." So he starts off, they're on their way to get him. Then he tells a story, and then he goes, "And when they arrived." And Mark does this quite a bit. So when you're looking at the book of Mark, it's important to see both parts. If we just take the first part, you say, "Oh, they said he's out of his mind." Okay, but then you go to the next part. See, there's actually a completion. So you need to look at the two together, and this is called bracketing, and it's something that Mark did fairly often. So why were they coming? Well, they were coming because here's Jesus, and he's causing a stir, and he's challenging the leaders, and they're worried. So they're like, "Oh my gosh, he's out of his mind." They don't think he's out of his mind for his preaching about God or even for healing people. They think he's out of his mind because he's stirring up the religious people against him. And the family unit was a very closed unit, and so when he's stirring up these people in power against him, he's stirring them up against his family too, because that's how families worked. They were very close knit. They were very tight. And they're like, "Man, we got to go shut this off. We've got to go. Well, before we get in trouble, we've got to close this down." So they went to get Jesus. And meanwhile, he's sitting there and he's casting out demons, and he's saying to the religious leaders, "You guys are committing this unforgivable sin because you're attributing God's work to Satan." So, he's doing the thing that they're worried about. And so when they get there, they want to stop him. So there's this interesting little comparison here. This is his family, the people who should know him better than anyone else. And they want to stop him. So what's happening is Jesus is out doing God's will, and his family's coming to stop him from doing God's will. So actually his family are working against God. And it's a lot like what happens with the Pharisees and the teachers of the law when they're opposing him too. So it's interesting that you have his family, the people who should know Jesus better than anyone else, and then you have the teachers of the law who should know the scripture better than anyone else, and both of them are opposing what Jesus is doing. So this is a warning to those of us who are teachers, who have just grown up in the church and have spent a lot of time. The ones who should know the most about Jesus can often be in danger of working against God. And we do not want to do that. So I think that's an important warning here for us to take into account. Now, where it says they want to take charge of him, that's actually a forceful term. That means they're coming to like put their authority over him and say, hey, your family is telling you you can't be doing this. So they're trying to impose the family's authority over him. That's what it means when it says take charge over him. So they're not coming to just ask him. They're coming saying, hey, this is an intervention. We're having a family meeting. We're cutting you off. You're going too far here. You're getting us in trouble. So this is actually like they're coming really trying to stop him. And in doing so, these people who are his family actually become outsiders. And in the New Testament times, being insiders or outsiders was very important, particularly in Israel. If you were not of Israel, you were an outsider. And his family, they should be the most insiders there were. But because they're actually working against God, they are becoming outsiders. But the passage ends with an invitation for people to come in, because it says, whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. His family, the people who are closest to him, they've become outsiders. But whoever is willing to come and do God's will, he can come in. He can be an insider. So there's an invitation here that's a very important invitation. And it's open for who? Oh, he points around to everybody there. One author I read said, Jesus and Peter probably had the relationship where he said, my sister, he probably pointed at Peter just to pick on him a little bit. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But he points to the people around him. He's saying, all of you, this crowd that's coming to see him, you can come in. You can be insiders. And that's a big deal. Now, Mark, the author, he was writing in a time when there was persecution. And a lot of the persecution wasn't necessarily by the government. It was persecution from the family. Families who would say, oh, you're rejecting our religion, you're rejecting our gods, well, you're not part of our family anymore. People were being rejected by their families. And so this story in the book of Mark would have been very important to the readers at that time, saying, maybe your family has rejected you because of following Christ and God's will, but Christ has welcomed you into his family. So that's good news to those people and to anyone who is in that situation. If you're doing God's will, you are part of God's family. You are Jesus' brother and mother and sister, and that tells us something about the nature of the church. The church is a family. Church is not an organization. Church is not a worship service that you go to. I mean, it has some form of organization, and churches worship, that's for sure, but it's not what a church is. The church is a family. And when you come to Christ, you are supposed to become part of a family. So even in large churches, there has to be a way where people can connect as family, because just sitting on a pew and looking at the back of somebody's head sitting in front of you and then shaking hands and walking out, I mean, maybe you had a great worship experience, but you weren't family unless you were really interacting. So it's very important, even for large churches, to have some kind of a small group where people can actually be brothers and sisters in more than name. And so when you come into the family of God, you're adopted and you adopt one another. In our church, we must all be brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, and have that kind of relationship with each other. And what happens in those relationships? We encourage each other, we love each other, we speak truth to each other. Now, I just wanted to read you a little quote from the very first Baptist pastor ever. His name was Thomas Helwys, and in 1612, he wrote that churches should be small so that they may perform all the duties of love one towards another. Now, again, there are big churches, I'm not speaking against big churches, but in every church, we must have a community, a family, And we have to make that happen, and we have to really be family together. So, this is something, it's not just, hey brother, hey sister. No, it's something that we have to really be living, is those family relationships. And you know what? You have been invited in. You're invited to be part of Jesus' family. Doesn't matter if you're man or woman. Doesn't matter the color of your skin. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. Doesn't matter where you come from, what language you speak. If you're willing to come to Jesus and do God's will, you can be welcomed in. So in this way, the invitation is inclusive. Everybody is welcome, but it's exclusive. Only those who do God's will. So, these are some thoughts for today. God bless you. I love you. I look forward to seeing some of you in person. The rest of you, I hope you will come watch again as we continue our study. Have a great week.